Assalamu alaikum. Today, continuing our topic from our previous 2 3 lectures, we'll continue with structuralism. At least this is the last and final part of structuralism. So far we have seen a little bit about its origin, the pioneers, the philosophies behind them all, and we saw a little bit about the scope of structuralism, and basically quite a bit about Claude Lévi-Strauss and Saussure and Roland Barthes, right? And we also saw the prominent works, at least in passing. And we looked into what the structuralist critics mainly do. Today, we'll be looking at this particular part. A structuralist critic works with a projected model of an underlying universal narrative structure, right? We are going to look at all the underlying structures that are there, that seems to be existing in all kinds of narrative. Right? So we looked into Roland Barthes' SZ, and how he devised all these 5 codes um, through analyzing Balzac's Sarrazin. Then we saw the 5 codes in passing: the proetic code, hermeneutic code, cultural code, semic code, and symbolic code, right? And we dealt with symbolic code at length using Poe's The Oval Portrait. So we fit in all those binaries and contrasts and parallels, true parallels, and all those. And we looked into the summary of the oval portrait, and we saw what our main focus was. It was mainly on structure, symbol, and design, and drew a verbal diagram. This verbal diagram is the courtesy of Peter Barry. Everything is courtesy. As I said earlier, I've been taking a lot of reference. In fact, the entire book of Peter Barry here. So we saw tried to draw parallels, echoes, reflections, repetitions, contrasts, and patterns in plot, structure, character, motive, situation, circumstance, language, and imagery. In each of these, we try to draw certain echoes, certain repetitions, or look for contrasts, we look for patterns, we draw parallels, right? Whether it be character separately or plot separately, structure separately, it could, like, individually in each of those. Then we saw how the symbolic code worked. First off, we saw that it had a binary structure in terms of narrative, having a frame narrative and the enclosed narrative, and then we looked at the pace of the narrative, how one form, the first half, seemed to be very leisurely, while the other half seemed to be going at a very rapid downward spiral. Then we looked at the chateau itself. Chateau itself seemed to be observing a very different function in each half. While in one case it seems to be a place of refuge, safety, security. It denoted something cozy, whereas in the other, the chateau was a place of danger and ultimately destruction, right? And we also saw the unequal distribution of power within each frame, with different effects. There are binaries here, 2 sets of binaries here, one of officer and valet, another one is that of artist and his wife. So in each case, there's the first, that is the officer and the artist, seem to hold more power, and the other, they are just act upon the whimsies of these two, right? So, I also asked a question as to the main actors in 2 halves, the wounded officer and the artist. What contrasts are observable in the mental state of these two, right? We've asked about the mental state of these 2 people and the contrast in those. And also, both the officer in the first part and the artist in the second are engrossed in a painting, but the role of art in the 2 halves is very different. What exactly is the contrast we looked at? We questioned what the contrast could possibly be in the role of art in 2 halves. So we saw a few further contrasts and some more generalized contrasts, and we also drew a parallel here in terms of the narrators, as in how both the narrators have a degree of anonymity. And we are made to question who exactly is speaking, right? So that's why this question arises, who the narrator is. And yeah, today we are going to look at semic code, cultural code, hermeneutic code, and prioritic code. Okay, so semic code works very much like symbolic code itself. All right, so just as symbolic code has has all these um, intrinsically or internally linked with the theme, the same goes for semic code. It is linked with not only the theme but the character as well, just as symbolic code. But the scale in which the semic code works is very minimal. You know, the structuralist looks for flickers of meaning. Flickers of meaning, as in, generally when we speak of meaning of a certain word, we do not ascribe or to merely one particular meaning, right? Every word is composed of multiple layers of meaning. So when you speak of flickers of meaning, what you're doing is you're looking at hints. Okay, all the possibilities or all the possible meanings that could be created out of a certain word or a certain phrase or a certain sentence or a couple of sentences. Yes, you look at all the implicit referencing that is going on, because see, any narrator, what it's sold, it's supposed to be implicit in nature. It should not tell you exactly what to think. It should make you think, right? It should make you think rather than tell you what to think. So any explicit reference is out of question. So whatever implicit referencing is going on, the structuralist looks at those, hints and tries to determine the characterization done, or the modes that that accompany or facilitate the characterization of the characters in the narrative, right? So the method used is close procedure. Try to note it's not a spelling or typo error here. CLOZE. That's how Peter Barry mentions it. So you tend to use this close procedure, which is nothing but deleting words from a text and having readers fill these gaps by drawing inferences from context and overall structure. So what the reader does is he has to look into the context to determine what word would fit. So if you're quite accustomed to a certain language, if you're like really fluent in the language, it'll be easy for you to put in the words. It's just like the grammar classes that you've done during your school time, right? You fit the best word that is possible among the choices given to you, right? So it's called closed procedure. Now, the main objective of the semicode is to relay the text to a projected model of an underlying universal narrative structure. As I said earlier, you're looking for an underlying universal narrative structure. Okay, so we've got a passage from Mervyn Jones' novel. So for symbolic code, we use The Old Portrait of Edgar Allan Poe. For semicode, we are going to use Mervyn Jones' novel. The name of the novel is not given, the entire plot, structure, nothing is given, except for the first few, the introductory part. Okay, so as introduction, we're told that this is John Edward Scott Armitage, 55 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, weight 13 stone 3 blank. So you have to think what would fit in best here, pounds or ounces. Number 2, June the 8th, a fine morning, 9:15. I mean, it's just a continuation of this. Okay, all of these constitute one paragraph possibly. So you can assume that it would all constitute one paragraph. So it's supposed to be just a continuation. June the 8th, a fine morning, 9:15 by the program change on the car radio. Also 9:15 exactly as he checked the time on his blank watch. So what kind of watch would he be wearing? Multifunction, Swiss watch, Swatch watch, Timex, pocket watch, Mickey Mouse. See, the implication is that whatever watch you put in there, that has to fit in with the context in which you are seeing this Mr. Armitage, right? So he is seen to be a 55-year-old. Now imagine a 55-year-old man wearing a Mickey Mouse watch. Does that fit? I mean, you have to look into the context to determine what word would fit in here. Okay. Now these kind of words is what you would call semicode, because these codes, these hints tell you what the character is about, what kind of character that person is. All right. Okay, number 3. Hendon Way, northbound, Armitage was driving a Jaguar. Just run in. Its newness pleased him. The blank smell of the leather, the neat zeros on the mileage dial. He was among those men whose car is never more than a year old. So we have Mr. Armitage driving a new car, a brand new car, a Jaguar. And this car has this beautiful smell of the leather, new leather. You have smelled a new car, right? It smells awesome. So what kind of smell, what kind of word could possibly fit in here? Would it be rich, sweet, heady, opulent, whatever? What smell would fit in there? It has to make sense, right? It has to fit in with the image of Mr. Armitage. So think about it. He was among those men whose car is never more than a year old, as in there is a generalization happening here. You are being told that you already know what kind of person Mr. Armitage is, right? The kind of person who always has new car, who always has to have new car, and someone who can actually afford it, right? So we get an idea that Armitage is a very wealthy person and always has a strong liking for new cars, and he likes all things opulent. Rich would be a little gaudy, sweet would imply a certain weakness in Mr. Armitage, heady would indicate that Armitage is probably proud and or rather given to flights of fancy. Now opulent is one word that would actually fit in here, don't you think? Because opulent indicates a certain class, right? A high class. There is further description. Then Armitage slows the car to. I mean, this is just it is abbreviated here. The whole certain situations abbreviated here. Then Armitage slows the car to look at two hitchhikers. There are two hitchhikers. Two people are walking up. They meet his standards of acceptability. He has certain standards as to who he can talk to, who he wanted to talk to, or who he can permit in his car, and he offers them a lift, but the response to his offer is momentary hesitation. See, he himself has certain standards. Okay, he himself has certain standards, as in he is not just offering lift to just about anyone. He sees if they are well dressed, if they are good enough. You wouldn't just go about talking to anyone and everyone, right? You would have your own standards, and though you may not consciously discriminate, you would still have your standards, right? So Mr. Armitage himself, being a very rich, sort of above the middle age guy, almost old guy, he has certain standards. Okay, and holding to those standards, when he offers a lift to someone, those people, instead of just being happy about it or being grateful for the lift, they are hesitating. Okay, they are hesitating. And what would the reaction of Armitage would be in that case? The text resumes. The boy still presented his pleasant smile. The boy is still smiling, and the smile is pleasant, but did not get into the car. The boy is, a little unsure, uncertain about getting into the car. Just because any rich guy offers you a lift, you don't get into it, right? Now he seemed to be considering not only the directions, but also the car and even Armitage himself. So this boy is not only thinking not only about the directions where they are supposed to go, where Armitage is supposed to go, and he's not only looking at the car, but he is also considering Armitage. He's wondering if this guy is trustworthy enough. Trustworthy isn't like you're not going to hand over all your valuables, you're not carrying any valuables, but still, you cannot get into the vehicle of a criminal, right? So it seems as if he is judging what kind of person Armitage is. The hitchhiker, in fact, was deciding whether to accept the driver instead of the other way around. Instead of the driver accepting the hitchhiker seems to be, deliberating on what kind of driver it is, or would it be wise to get into the car, to accept the driver at all. Armitage was dash. Armitage was dash. In a few seconds more, he might have been indignant. He might have gotten angry a little bit. But the girl said, "This is fine. Yes, it is. Super, really." So, what kind of word would fit in here? Armitage was baffled. Armitage was stumped. Armitage was gobsmacked. Now, when this gobsmacked itself has a very sort of, it creates a very hilarious image, right? Stumped would indicate that Armitage is clueless, right? Baffled would be almost very close, come close to indignant. So the next step to bafflement would be indignation in this case, because he is taking offense here, right? Offense that he himself has certain standards, and these people are questioning his standards. These nobodies are questioning his standards. So, number 5. She spoke eagerly, indeed with some impatience at the boy's hesitation, and she too smiled at Armitage, but more than pleasantly. Blank, he thought. Of course. They were lucky to get a long ride in a new Jaguar. The girl clearly realized this. She seemed, moreover, to be happy to travel with Armitage. As soon as this notion occurred to him, Armitage saw that it was absurd, yet it was an attractive thing for her to give such an impression. So, this was about the boy. Now here, the girl who seems quite eager to get into the car with Armitage, and she's impatient at the boy's hesitation. She's probably, she thinks that, okay, why look the gift horse in the mouth, right? And she too smiled at Armitage. So she's smiling, but it's not merely a pleasant smile as was with the boy. The boy has a pleasant smile, whereas the girl could be happy, cheerful, could be smiling invitingly or gleefully. Now, each one has a different kind of connotation. Now, happily would indicate she's just happy that she got, she got off her feet. That should be enough for her. Cheerfully would be she's cheerful that, okay, without even asking for it, she is getting this right, and she's really cheerful, just more than happy, but still happy nevertheless. Invitingly would indicate certain, certain different kind of connotation. So it just wouldn't suit because this guy is pretty old. Again, gleefully would make the girl a child, right? Only a child would smile gleefully for getting it right. So she would not come off as an adult. So see how each adjective seems to determine the character of the girl, or here, certain adjective here would change the way, Armitage is seen, or the character of Armitage would be altered by each word. Then, yeah, she blank into the front seat. So she could get into the front seat would be simple enough, but we have certain options here. She jumped quickly into the front seat, plumped heavily into the front seat, slid seductively into the front seat, slid easily into the front seat, squeezed awkwardly into the front seat, slipped quietly into the front seat. So it could be just about anything. This would indicate that she's over enthusiastic. She wants to get in immediately. She jumps, okay, without any grace. Plumped heavily, as in she is awkward and she just, probably rather too heavy. But since she's hitchhiking, we don't know. Slid seductively would indicate certain sexual connotation. And slid easily would indicate that she is accustomed to cars and she doesn't mind getting into a stranger's car. Squeezed awkwardly again is an indication of an awkwardness, that she is not comfortable getting into the car. Slipped quietly, as in it would make her a little, you know, her character contradictory to her cheerful or happy attitude earlier. Okay, she cannot slip quietly. So she blanked into the front seat and the boy got into the back. See, she is the way she is getting into is highlighted, whereas the boy is you could say neglected, or rather he recedes to the background because he simply got into the back. Okay, the way he climbs into the car is not specified. Armitage pulled away quickly to get ahead of a removal van. He drove in a thrusting style, seizing every opportunity, overtaking in roaring third gear. He met and then dismissed the thought that the girl's presence beside him had made him show off his skill. So, how does Armitage drive? He drives really fast, and he's driving in a thrusting style, and he's sort of overdoing his driving abilities. And he feels that he is showing off for the girl's sake, who seems to have smiled cheerfully at him. But still, he tries to banish the thought, thinking that she is, she's just a good girl, okay, young girl. Now, sorry, this was supposed to have been six, question six, or the paragraph, the part six of the paragraph. So the answers are here for all the questions asked. First one would be ounces, as in John Edward Scott Armitage, 55-year-old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, weight 13 stone, 3 ounces. Because a person who wants to be known with all four names of his, who doesn't want it shortened, or who's shown, by the narrator in this whole entirety, would know his name, who would know his weight to the ounce. Okay, how many of us know our names to the ounce? None of us do, right? Very few of us, maybe. We would generally say we are either 50 kg or 60 kg or 30 or not 30, but maybe 40 kgs or something like that, or 40, 45. We wouldn't go into like I weigh 45 kg, 0.600 grams. No, we don't go to the grams. We leave it at kilograms, right? So a person with four names, okay, and who is very particular about how many inches tall he is, would obviously know his weight to the ounces. So ounces would suit here. Again, a person of this, who has a name of this length would possibly have a watch that is Swiss, right? And also a person who is really wealthy and is wearing a Swiss watch and is driving a Jaguar, would like to have an opulent smell of the leather, something that is classy, not crude. Now, again, keeping in mind all the previous the context in which we've seen Armitage so far, we can understand that he is baffled, not stumped or gobsmacked. Again, when when this girl is presented for the first time, we can understand Armitage to see this girl as smiling not merely pleasantly but cheerfully, right? Instead of merely being happy, which would give her a pleasing appearance, she's cheerful. She's smiling more than pleasantly, right? So it is bound to be cheerful, neither invitingly nor gleefully. Again, this girl, she seems to not merely jump or plump or squeeze or slip, but rather would slid easily. she seems to have, at least she seems to come off as having that aura. We're made to feel that the girl is attractive, and Armitage is physically aware of her, but the text would tell you that she slid easily into the front seat, implying a certain slender gracefulness, right? Instead of merely the boy who simply got into the back. Now, if the man had noted how the boy got in and just ignored the way the girl got in, it would imply that the person, Armitage himself, is not really interested in the girl, right? So, this close procedure, like for instance, the Swiss watch. Now, the Swiss watch would indicate that Armitage is belongs to a, has a well ordered image, a well to do life already established, in the, like as it is established in the first few lines itself, right? So these are all hints that give flickers of meaning. These flickers may shift into something else, giving different meanings, provided the adjectives used for them. I mean, we're not. I keep using this word adjective quite a bit, but apparently uh, in some three places we've been just looking at adverbs and adjectives here, right? So yes, with the change of the word itself, the meanings would change. The meanings or the connotations in which we see the person would change, the characterization would change. So this close exercise indicates certain something of the small scale but nonetheless crucial workings of the semic code in the construction of character, while also showing how, in sequence, this code can begin to activate thematic motifs, such as the notion of orderliness and control associated with Armitage. So this close exercise, the exercise just done, we went through, will indicate in the small scale workings of the semicode in the construction of a character, how the character is constructed. And we also show, and it would also show how in sequence this code can begin to activate thematic motifs. Thematic motifs as in how the theme is going to come about recurringly throughout the narrative, as in how this Armitage is used to having control, used to having orderliness in his life, order in his life, right? And how he wants to control things that happen to him, right? Now we move on to hermeneutic code. It is fairly simple. It just tells you, these are just points wherein you identify certain enigmas are created in the narrative. Okay, questions are created in the narrative, because without those questions, without those enigmas, narratives would not exist. Okay, even waiting for Godot, without any too many characters, without having any plot as such, excelled excelled or attracted enough um, you know enough acclaim and criticism, mainly because there is an enigma. At least I believe so. There's always a question of who this Goro is, where it's going to, where it's going to come from, and what is going to happen when this Goro comes into play. Right? This enigma is something that holds people's attention to the narrative, without which the narrative would not exist. So hermeneutic is very crucial to a text, and see, reader is made to speculate about possible outcomes. The reader wonders about what is about to happen, right? Say for instance, there is one hero and two heroes, and you are made to wonder who she is going to end up with, right? So possible outcomes you look for, you wonder about the possible outcomes, working out enigmas. You've got all these enigmas. See, for instance, there is a hint of some skeleton from the past. You wonder what that skeleton is about, right? See, for instance, a certain character is always sad about something or maybe jaded about something, and you are made to wonder what exactly made that person that way. Or you see a certain heroine, in a certain novel, she is always hiding herself a lot. She doesn't make friends, she's reticent. Okay, it could be natural to some extent, but nobody is that reticent, right? So you're made to wonder what exactly happened with her to make her so. So these enigmas are created, which is identified by the hermeneutic code. Okay, while working with hermeneutic code, a reader is made to speculate about possible outcomes, working out enigmas, and predicting the possible patterns of events and motives. So you are made to predict the pattern of event, because everything seems to be patterned out. Everything seems to be in structure, work in motives, right? As in motives, as in I spoke about motifs, motives. So you're made to question what is going to happen as a result of this meeting. So applying hermeneutic code to the example we just used, that of Armitage, we are bound to wonder what will happen now that these people have met. Armitage has met with the hitchhikers, right? So we are going to wonder if either one of them is going to take advantage of the other, or is it going to be an innocent meeting, or if it is an innocent meeting, why bother putting it in there, right? As we of as a narrator, you wouldn't put something that is not necessary for the development of a plot, right? So this cannot be an innocent coincidence. It cannot be useless to the narrative. It has to make sense. So you're going to wonder what would happen now that boy, and are they going to play any role in disrupting his orderliness or disrupting his control, or if this person Armitage himself is going to disrupt the lives of these two people. So you wonder what is going to happen as a result of this meeting. Are the hitchhikers as innocent as they seem? You know, we see that the boy is hesitant, whereas the girl is jubilant. We see that the boy is more reserved, whereas the girl is more outgoing. But it could be a ploy. Yeah, it could be a ploy to distract the driver. You never know. But you're made to wonder nevertheless. Are they really innocent, or are they scheming villains or thieves or something? Will Armitage's confidence be shaken in some way as the novel progresses? What is going to happen as the novel would progress? Will Armitage, see, Armitage seems to be a confident, composed person who doesn't waver anywhere. He has led a major part of his life, and he is quite sure about himself. He's quite certain about himself, right? Now, it is quite possible that this chance meeting would bring in the disruption that is necessary for a plot to progress, right? Now, the cultural code, applying the cultural code to the same example of Mervyn Jones' novel. So the text appeals to our prior knowledge of this kind of man as a distinct type with a whole range of related characteristics and habits. So the text simply relies on your own previous knowledge. Okay, see, for instance, there's this one sentence where you're told, I'll go back to that slide. Yeah. Hendon Way Northbound, Armitage was driving a Jaguar just run in. Its newness pleased him. The blank smell of the leather, the opulent smell of the leather, the neat zeros on the mileage dial. He was among those men whose car is never more than a year old. He was among those men, as in, you're not told what kind of man he is. You are made to assume, you're made to rely on your own prior knowledge of those men. And who are those men? The men whose car is never more than a year old. So there is a kind of cultural connotation here, right? A cultural connotation that tells you that there are certain class of men, there are certain kinds of men, there is a certain kind of men who always need to have new car, and these men have certain certain very distinctive characteristics or certain distinctive habits, right? So all the whole range of related characteristics and habits are brought to mind merely by the indication of a certain practice of that person. All right, so that's how stereotypes are formed. So if you have any confusions about cultural code, all you need to do is think about all those stereotypes. Someone with a hippie genes, just because someone's fond of pizza, you assume all sorts of things about that person. Someone speaks in a certain accent, you assume so many things about that person. Okay, some of those assumptions may be biased, may be prejudiced, but much of it relies on the cultural connection, because whatever cultural background we come from, it is reflected upon by our practice, in our practices, right? So this is all for today. The working of priority code is quite obvious from the way uh, we haven't mentioned it here, but priority code would be indicated in the very action of Armitage, where he offers a right, right? Yeah. So he decides to offer a right that itself would move the story forward. So any story needs a certain indication of action, right? So we've seen all the 5 codes. That is all for today. Thank you. Stay safe. Be happy. Assalamu alaikum.